These TrueRC patch antennas recently went up for pre-order, and since I've been able to fly with them for a while, I thought I'd give you guys a few impressions, tell you what I think of them, and I'm going to cover some of the physical characteristics of these antennas as well as how they perform in flight. Hopefully this will help you decide if you want to get these antennas for your HDZero VRX. Let's go ahead and start with the physical characteristics. Now, if you watched my HDZero VRX review, you'll remember that the VRX has rails in the front, and those rails allow you to slide antennas on and kind of attach them securely to the front of the VRX. I thought this was a really cool addition. I think it's neat that you're able to do that, and I think it has some advantages. And these TrueRC antennas are the first antennas you can get that are kind of made for that system. Now, the dimensions of that rail system are public, so if you want to, you can download an STL file of that rail mount and 3D print it, and you can glue it onto any antenna and slide it onto that rail system. But there is one catch, and there's one thing that makes these antennas better suited for that than other ones you might have lying around. You see, if you look at most normal patch antennas, you'll see a SMA connector coming right off the back of that patch antenna, and you can immediately see the problem here. Not only would it be really hard to actually glue that bracket onto the back of that patch antenna, but even if you could fit it on there, you're not going to be able to slide that antenna flush onto the VRX rail system. That connector is going to get in the way. What they've done differently on these X2-Airs is you can see there's a wire soldered to the back of that patch antenna, and it comes off at a 90-degree angle and then terminates in a short SMA connection. So this gives you a nice flush mounting system. The bracket attaches directly to the back of the antenna, and you can slide it onto the VRX for a nice flush fit. I really like the way the system works. The patches slide on nicely, and I feel like this is the most compact and most secure way you can modularly mount patches onto a VRX. It's a pretty neat setup. Now, one thing I'll say is that this rail system doesn't really lock into place, so it kind of just friction fits onto the VRX, but it's really not that big of a problem because when you screw the SMA connection into the SMA connector on the VRX, that definitely holds it in place. So you can see there's a short wire connecting it, and just the tension of that wire holds the patches very securely onto the VRX. You'll notice that the X2-Airs do extend a bit above and below the VRX, so when you have them mounted, it does make the whole setup a little bit more bulky, but I feel like the rail system does a good job of kind of minimizing that and just making it feel like one piece. And you have those short little wires on there, but this just feels like a really nice compact setup, and I'm really happy with the way this works. And there's one other aspect to the X2-Airs that makes them particularly well suited for this use case. They have a very high gain of 13 dB. That's much higher than the gain on the SharkBite receiver, and it's higher than most smaller patch antennas you can find. But in addition to that high gain, they have a very wide beam angle. So here's what you need to know about beam angle and how TrueRC specifies these measurements. So if you're flying anywhere in front of yourself, up to 150 degrees in front of you, which is almost completely in front of you, you're going to get at least the performance of a normal Omni antenna. So that means if you're on the side of your flying area or in the corner of your flying area, you're going to be just fine. You're going to have the same performance as if you had Omnis on your receiver. You can't fly behind yourself, but as long as you don't do that, you could really get away with just having patch antennas on your VRX. But if you want to get that better performance, you will need to be a little bit more directional with where you're flying. So that 13 dB maximum gain is going to be with the antenna pointed directly at your drone. They do specify that the negative 3 dB beam width is about 75 degrees horizontal. So what that means is that within that 75 degree field of view, you're going to get minus 3 dB, which is in this case about 10 dB gain, which is still really, really good for a patch antenna. So it is directional, but you're going to get pretty good performance even if you're not directly pointing at your drone. So these antennas have unusually good specifications for patch antennas, and it's going to make them well suited for those really long range flights, as well as kind of for more general flying and flying where you're not directly pointing at your drone. That's a good thing to see for the way a lot of us fly. So that's kind of some of the physical aspects, and that's why these are an appealing set of antennas to use, but I did get the chance to fly quite a bit with these antennas, and so I wanted to give you guys my thoughts. For all of my flying recently, I've used these X2-Airs mounted on the rail system of the VRX, and then on the top SMAs, I have a set of TrueRC OCP Omni antennas. The specs of these Omni antennas make them look pretty similar to other Omni antennas I've seen, but TrueRC says that they're really good, and I think eventually they plan to sell a set of these OCP antennas with the X2-Airs, so I decided to use that whole setup for this test. I didn't do any long range flying in this test. It's just not something that I'm really set up to do, and I think the performance of antennas like this is already pretty well understood for that long range flight. Remember that if you want to get the full 13 dB gain, you're going to need to be in direct line of sight with the drone, and I know that the long range guys already know that. I think these antennas are going to perform really well for that long range use case, and you know if 13 dB is impressive to you or not, but I don't really have any concerns with it. I think it's a pretty good number, and I imagine if you want to use this for long range flying. But what I was really curious about and what I tested is how this performed in more dense urban environments around trees and buildings and things like that. That's normally how I fly, and I was curious whether the extra performance from these patch antennas was going to result in anything I could notice when I was flying around in those environments. So I went for several test runs. I'm going to show some of them on the screen while I'm talking about this, but here's basically what I thought. My impression from doing these flights was that in most cases I felt like the X2-Air was giving me a little bit more performance than the SharkBite VRX. When I got to the extreme penetration portions of this flight where the signal was really starting to break up and it was really hard to see, I did feel like the X2-Air gave me just a little bit of extra push in those spots, and the breakup was a little bit less and maybe a little bit more confident flying there. I feel like these antennas aren't magic. I mean, if you're in an area with a bunch of obstacles or a bunch of radio interference, you're going to have trouble no matter what you're using. It's not going to suddenly make all those environments crystal clear, but it did feel like it had that little bit of extra gain, and I felt like that was helpful in some of the spots where I was flying here. This flying environment is a good example of where that wide beam angle is helpful, so I wasn't really thinking too much about what direction I was pointing my head in. I did kind of try to stay focused on the farthest point where I knew I was going to get the worst penetration, but I didn't move around very much at all, and I was picking up good signal even when I was kind of to the left or the right of where I was pointing. So from that perspective, I felt like the antennas performed well and they were giving me a good advantage in this environment. Overall, I'd say the X2-Airs work pretty well in urban environments. It's not earth-shatteringly better than the SharkBite VRX patches, so don't expect miracles, but I think you will see some better performance at the extremes of penetration, as well as when you're flying not directly in front of you. So that wide beam angle is really going to help you out if you're flying around a large area. So overall, should you buy this set of TrueRC patch antennas? I think if you want to put patch antennas on your HDZero VRX, this is clearly the best option right now. As I mentioned, they're designed to go in the front of the VRX. They've got that wire coming out the side instead of the back, so it's going to make for a nice compact setup that's really easy to use. It already has the bracket installed, and I just really like the way this feels. I like the way it fits together. I don't mind having it on the VRX. I don't feel like it takes up a lot of space in my bag, and just all of that is a really nice system. If you like to fly long range, you know that that extra gain is going to be really helpful, and you've got a pretty good beam angle with that gain, so you shouldn't have any trouble flying long range with this. And again, it's a nice compact setup. You're not dealing with huge antennas or those helical antennas that stick way out, so I think some of you long range guys might be interested in this. If you fly in urban environments, I think that you'll see good performance in terms of penetration behind buildings. Like we said, it's not going to do miracles, but I do think you'll see some improvements there. The wide beam angle is going to make it easier to fly in a larger area to your left and right, so that might be of benefit too. Now, I don't think these antennas are for everyone. If all you do is fly inside your house, around your house, in smaller areas like that, if you're not going really far away or trying to penetrate through a bunch of obstacles, I don't really think you need something like this. You'll find that the HDZero system really does perform pretty well with just Omni antennas. So if you want, you could just use 4 stubby Omni antennas on this VRX and have something that's really, really small and compact and also really cheap. And I think that's going to perform pretty well in situations where you're just flying in close proximity. It's definitely going to do well if you're flying behind yourself rather than only in front of yourself. So that's another option to consider too. Anyway guys, that's all I had. I just wanted to share some quick thoughts on those antennas because I know some of you guys are probably seeing that pre-order and wondering if you should go for it. I hope this helped give you an idea of how these perform and kind of help set your expectations for what you would see with these antennas. As always, I'll have links down in the description if you want to purchase the antennas. I do appreciate it if you use those links, but most of the retailers should be carrying those things, so your favorite retailer will probably have these antennas soon. And definitely let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions about the antennas, or if you want me to do a particular test with the antennas, maybe I can make a future video doing that test. So let me know what you think. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.